So, hello everyone. My name is Seán Lacey. I'm the Research Integrity and Compliance Officer for the University, and welcome to this virtual seminar looking at the overlap between research data management and research ethics. I suppose when we think of research involving human participants, it's kind of natural to think of the research ethical aspects of that in terms of informing participants, and that they give consent, the right for participants to maybe withdraw from a study, I suppose the right to debrief participants, or the right for the participants to have information to look what actually happens with the information that they give you. But also another key component to I suppose good research practice on research that involves human participants is around the data management, the management of the data that the participants actually give you. And I suppose essentially when we look at maybe managing data poorly, that would undermine the responsibility to the research participants, or responsibility to funders, to the university, and so on like that. And with that in mind, then, when it comes to our human research ethics application forms, there is a section specifically relating to data collection, data management, data storage, and that will be section D of the actual application forms. So I'm delighted to introduce Therese, our metadata and research data librarian, who's going to talk to us about the intersection between research data management and research ethics, with a particular focus on how to complete the appropriate sections to the human research ethics application form. Over to you, Therese.
Thanks, Seán. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen there. Hope you can all see that. So yeah, thank you all for coming today. So we're going to talk about the intersection between research data management and research ethics. And I suppose, why are we talking about it? Why is it important? And the reality is that this is becoming a mandate. It's becoming a requirement from funders. It's already within policy statements and policies within MTU. There's national policies related to this, and international. So essentially we have to going forward with this, and also it's a very good idea, which we'll go into in more detail later. But I suppose most relevantly for today, and hopefully a reason for you to have turned up, is that a good knowledge of research data management is will help you to actually just go ahead and fill out forms like the research ethics application forms quickly and easily, and have a record of those available to you that you can put your hand on long after your project or studies are completed, so that you're covered should any questions arise in terms of research integrity or research ethics. So this is just an example really of this is the Irish Research Council. They're in their application guide, so application for their funding. They have it they're front and center in their guide, that, you know, when you're creating ethical statements, when you're applying, that you do need to take note that successful applications really will have due regard to research ethics, and included in that is details of data management plans or possible issues. Similarly, Science Foundation Ireland. So I'm just giving examples here of our main funders. And Science Foundation Ireland, again, look front and center. They, as part of their insurance processes, they call it a data provenance review. Again, look, it's all related to effective data management practices and integrity, and it's tied up usually with data ethics and ethics application forms prior to looking for this funding, and to be successful in it. Again, you do need to be aware of this. So Horizon Europe, then, this is taken directly from Horizon Europe's application guide, and they actually make open science practices, such as having a data management plan mandatory for all beneficiaries of grant agreements. So you know, when we're talking about research, we're talking about possibly the income for the university when it comes to funders. So, you know, these are requirements that we all need to be on top of. Now, also, you know, say you're not dealing with funded research yet, or in this particular case, we do need to be aware of it, regardless, from an MTU point of view, because you know, again, it's a good idea. It allows us to maintain excellence in research integrity, and it helps us to comply with our ethics, our research ethics, throughout the life cycle of the project. This is a direct extract from our research data management policy. We can give links to all of these. They're all easily available on the MTU website. And this just explains, I suppose, what we're talking about today. What is research data, first of all? Today we mean it's everything to do with your research project, regardless of how big or small that research project is, regardless of whether it's funded or not, according to the policy, you know, which was taken on advice and according to international and national best practice. We so MTU strongly encourages you know, managing your research data, and according to the policy, your research data includes you know, files before, during, and after your project. So any data that you might be reusing from other sources, you know, primary data, of course, your results that you collect, and it can be in lots of different forms. Oftentimes humanities or business researchers, especially humanities, really kind of think that they might not have data, as it is. I suppose we're used to looking at data kind of like in the images here, but it's actually qualitative or quantitative, factual or non-factual. It can be numerical, textual, and so on. It's whatever is necessary to validate or reproduce your research findings at all stages of your research process. And in this case, again, related to today, we would recommend that if and when you are creating your research data management plan, that you would include your ethics application, if one is necessary. Again, so that all of the data related to that if you need to put your hand on it, that you have a record of it. You know, it could be long after the fact. Say there's a question about a participant's age or vulnerability, or you know, any other data protection issues, you can put your hand on it, and all of the decisions that went into you know, making the content that went into that form, all of that data is available to describe and hopefully cover yourself for any issues. So research data management then is the management of all of this data that we are speaking about. So it's the management of everything in a formal document, and the main point really as to how your data management plan can relate to you know, excellent research integrity and ethics is that it's a detail of how and who will collect, store, how your data is collected, it's stored, it's distributed, what data is distributed and collected, and who will be in charge of that, essentially. And as I say, we recommend that that you would include any research ethics data to be included within that. And a data management plan at the end of the day will show that you've complied with all requirements throughout your study, and it's a go-to document should any questions arise after the fact. So how do we request and how is it internationally recognized that you manage this data? And this is done again, if you look at our policies or any international policies or your funder requirements, you will see that the FAIR data principles should be applied. So your data at the end of the day should be findable, it should be accessible, it should be interoperable and reusable. So this allows us to maintain research integrity standards in that you know, studies can be replicated. Now, beyond that, there is a caveat with this, in that while we're looking for these, you know, all of these things for it to be findable and accessible, if there is I suppose limitations on that data, such as for personal data, which we will speak about a lot today in relation to the ethics form, then there is a caveat on that data that it can be as open as possible, but as closed as necessary. So legal and you know, ethical considerations do trump the requirement or the desire for everything to be openly available. So it's only as open as possible. So there's an understanding there that you know, legal requirements such as GDPR, etc., do take priority, of course. So we can move on to the form, and we can get going. The vast majority of what we're going to be talking about today is in section D of the research ethics application form in relation to human studies. It's the full form. I suppose it might be useful for engagement if you do open up that form as we're going through the workshop today, just so you can refer to it. There's just one field within section A that does ask, is there a data management agreement in place with the external investigators or external organizations? And what we would say here is that you know, refer back to again, the research data management policy, and you can get a clear answer here. Well, you can get an answer here. So you know, if what we mean here by any previous agreement is possibly any collaborative agreements you have with you know, other institutions, be they international or whatever else, that you know, that there would be a pre-agreed written document relating to how data will be managed, including confidential or personal data, or data where, you know, ethical issues need to be attached to them. So that's section A. Then if we move on to section C, so again, we're just going to quickly go through these. Probably the most relevant to what we're speaking about today would be the risk to participants question. So oftentimes when people are going through the form, they may just take the minimal risk, but I suppose we would ask you to consider if there was something like a data leak, what the risk to participants could be, and just let that colour your answer to the question below, which is please indicate the steps that will be taken to control any risk. You know, and that would depend on the study, it depends on the participants, it depends on the type of data. It can depend on the, you know, the GDPR status of the participant data. So for example, if it's related to children, or if it's related to those with, you know, with any extra vulnerabilities, that may need to be taken consideration of, if it's health data, and so on. But we will cover all of those risks and those types of data throughout the workshop as well. And I'm hoping to send you off and maybe have a think about your own data with reference to you know, to some sites and some helpful areas where you can have a real think about the risks related to your study. Then on to section C. Yeah, so section C deals with research design and so on. And again, just kind of reiterating, if it goes on the ethics application, put it into your data management plan, so you have that for posterity and as a record that everything was done satisfactorily. And then of course we're talking about the participant risk there in section C. So moving on then to the main part of the research ethics form that we're talking about today, is section D. And first up within section D then is what arrangements are in place to ensure that the identity of each participant remains confidential. And of course, this relates to data protection and participant data ethics, wherever you look for it. So, you know, if you're looking on the GDPR, through GDPR legislation, if you're looking through any of your funders' application forms, if you're looking through MTU's data policies, even outside of the research sphere, they will state that I suppose the most important piece of data to protect is an individual's personal data, and that that GDPR is extremely specific in how it deals with looking after this, depending on study, the participant, the type of data, and so on. We also ask as well in question 13 there that this relates to back to the wording, information provided should align with section 15 information. So that's section 15 information then asks you the format of the data that will be collected, stored and accessed, and takes us through then where it asks you to consider whether you will be anonymizing, de-identifying, pseudonymizing, or so on, and examples there of you know, pseudonymization of data is given here by our own our own data protection commission, and it's a good site. It's quite detailed. What I might do, as this is a workshop, is send you off with reference now for the next few minutes. I suppose we'll say maybe a maximum of 10 minutes to have a think about questions 13 and 15 from section D of the research ethics forms. We can provide links there if you need anything. And think about, you know, either a study that you have in mind, or you know, you can make up a study that you know you might possibly be looking at in the future, as to what form the data that you will be collecting will be collected, and how it will be then stored and accessed. So essentially what I want you to do is just answer this question. And as I say now, it's just a quick, there's no right or wrong for now. It's just a quick exercise in looking at what anonymization means, and how you can protect your participants practically with the data that you're collecting. So if there's any questions there though, give me a shout or put it into the chat, and if anyone's unhappy with that. So if we say for the next 10 minutes, if we just have a look at that.
So there's just a question in the chat there, Therese, while others might be thinking about their own data, is that for section A, what if there is no data management agreement in place, example for EU projects? So this goes back to the previous slide that you would have had.
Yeah.
You want to maybe go back to that one?
So that's absolutely fine. I mean, you know, the question there is if it usually relates to if there would be a collaboration. If there is collaboration with other organizations, universities, or international partners, then I would suggest, again, going by our own policies in relation to data management and in relation to the Code of Good Research Conduct, that an agreement would be put in place. So I suppose if the person that asked that question, are you talking about if, you know, if this relates to collaboration?
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, we collaborate with different universities and institutions, but there wouldn't be explicitly like a data management agreement in place when the EU project is approved. So it's just when you're talking about external people there in section 1, I was just wondering, do we have to go,
I would say that, you know, especially if there's would there be personal participant data included within the study?
Yeah, like sometimes you would have to conduct surveys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, an agreement really should be in place to decipher, I suppose, who has overall charge of it. If it's based, you know, if there's equal responsibility amongst each of the collaborative partners, that's fine, but that would need to be stated. So what would need to be agreed is, you know, who has access afterwards, where it's going to be stored, how it's going to be stored, and yeah. So I mean, I looking through, say, you know, even, are we talking about outside Horizon Europe here, or?
Yeah, like Erasmus Plus projects as well. So like, would we have to have that in place before we go for ethical approval?
It's recommended, yeah.
Okay.
And such an agreement then would allow you to fill out the form you know, it just makes it easier for everybody, and it does mean then that you know, one of your big points of data ethics is met in that you have agreed as to what sort of data is going to be available, where it's going to be available, and who has responsibility for it, and what sort of access is allowed to it then, say, amongst the partners in the first instance. And then of course, you know, if it's going to be publicly available, that's another linked issue, but separate.
Could I come in there, Therese, as well on this, on that one? So it wouldn't necessarily be a requirement for the application form to have a research data management agreement in place, but it would be encouraged, because you'll see now in the later part here of this seminar, it'll help basically, if you have that information, if you have that agreement in place, it actually helps answer the questions that are going to become, that Therese is going to be touching on later on. So I suppose the research data management agreement basically helps kind of, I suppose, have clarity and even transparency around, well, who's going to be storing the data? There's no point, you know, an external collaborator thinking, oh, MTU are doing that, and then MTU are thinking it's the external person. It's to have that clarity, which is needed in the ethics application form, and basically a research data management agreement in place would just complement that. But I suppose it's just to kind of say, look, it's not a requirement, but it is definitely encouraged, because I just think in the long run it makes things easier. Maybe just if we take one more question there, Therese, and we might start back then if that suits you.
Sure.
Just and I know that there's a couple of other questions in the chat, so we will come to them. Okay, so it's not that we're just cutting off anyway. So it's just another question, and maybe this is where we're going to be going with the seminar now as well. But another participant just asked if they have participant data and they've removed the names and replaced the names with numbers. Is this pseudo-anonymized?
Yes. Yeah, is the short answer to that question. Yeah, so I mean, if you do have a further look at the Data Protection Commissioner's document, it is very difficult actually to fully anonymize data and to be 100% certain that it is anonymized. And you know, there's whole areas of research dedicated to I suppose de-anonymizing information and you know, trying to hack it to identify it. So you know, we essentially we can't tell. So you know, even if you do anonymize something, will it continue to be anonymized in the future? It's a gray area, and it's something that we need to constantly keep on top of. So for the vast majority of I suppose anonymization attempts, it is usually pseudo-anonymization that is applied, and in that case, what you're describing there is correct as pseudo-anonymization. Yeah.
And just look, that will feed into the next, I know I said we'd stop, but actually the next one actually links in with that previous question there. So it's just around that there are different data, the data formats that we can see in the screen there, from anonymous down to pseudo-anonymized. And the question is, what's the gap between de-identified and potentially identified described, or where is that described? And maybe I could just answer that, because there are actually resources, and we'll pop 2 links into the chat there to get access to them, but there are as those resources up on Canvas. It's a kind of a repository of resources in relation to the research ethics application process. And in one of those resources talks about the data format, and there's a couple of, I suppose, definitions around de-identified, potentially identifiable, pseudo-anonymized and stuff. So that should help in that case. I suppose from my point of view, how I look at this, and look open for correction here from Therese, potentially identifiable, like that's if I go back to the previous comment, like if we apply a number for a participant, okay, so just say Seán is number 10. Now, if that's stored somewhere, that's a key essentially. Like even if that's stored somewhere, then that would make the data potentially identifiable, because if somebody got the data and then got the key and put them together, they can see, oh, Seán is number 10. Oh, Seán said this in response. So that's where potentially identifiable would then come into play. But there's more information. Look, Therese is going to be speaking more to it now in a couple of minutes as well, but there's more information up on a repository of resources on Canvas as well. Okay. Is that okay with you, Therese?
Yeah, yeah, is that all right with that? Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, super. So I think we can go on to the next bit then, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, just and again, yeah, just partially de-identifying information there is pseudonymization of data, again, according to our data protection office, which you know, has a direct link to the working group that created the GDPR legislation. So and I suppose, yeah, just on that, yeah, so there's, yeah, there's lots of resources related to this. All of your funders and the legislation itself will all say that it is the responsibility of the researcher to ensure that an honest and a good effort has been made to protect your data, your subjects' data, and that you'd be happy to, I suppose, essentially stand over it yourself. And usually, again, a combination of methods can increase the protection for that data. Again, utilizing resources like Seán has mentioned, for the nitty-gritty of getting down to it and applying that to your data. So yeah, do we want to I suppose could people put into words either in the chat or on audio how they think, I suppose, what the pinch point is, what the pain point is for them in answering this question, and whether they were able to answer it. So whether they were able to literally indicate the form in which the data that that we're considering will be collected, stored, or accessed. Does anybody want to jump up there and so literally answer this question from the form, or partly answer the question? And I would say there doesn't have to be a right or a wrong answer to this. The legislation itself, says that there's no 100% in relation to this. So I'd say just give a holler, whoever has any thoughts at all.
Sorry, Therese, what you looking for here?
So I'm just literally looking for, so we went off, possibly had a look at anonymization, pseudonymization techniques, and just considering subject data, how we would answer this question. So does anybody have a data set in mind, or a made up data set as to how they would answer this question on the form? And if not, maybe we can answer why, not. So if you're not able to answer this question, maybe we can, if we want to work through that.
I could share my example.
Thanks, Niall.
So I think looking at this, I have a study in mind to run starting in the autumn, and I would have, as I collected identifiable data for approximately, I would need maybe 24 months, 36 months. And then I would be looking then to anonymize that data once that is completed, once the data collection, because it's longitudinal data collection, it would not make sense to anonymize it or potentially it might make sense to pseudo-anonymize it during the data collection, but I would see it as being quite impractical. And then once the data is collected and there's no more going back to the participants, I would then at that point anonymize the data and store it anonymized.
Perfect. Thanks, Niall. Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're talking about. So essentially it's identifiable when collected, and hopefully anonymized then upon storage. Is that a fair assessment of
Yeah.
the data? Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So yeah, apologies if it was unclear, but yeah, that's what we're talking about, and hopefully just getting you to think about that. That's, you know, that's probably a very common result that Niall is describing there, that to collect your data, that it is identifiable. It might have to be identifiable in the collection, and then further processing can hopefully render it anonymous or pseudonymized for protection after the fact. So yeah, we'll move on.
Could I just come in there one small bit
Yeah,
there,
of course,
Therese?
Seán, yeah.
No, just go back to the last one, because I mean, fully agree with everything being said there. And I suppose just one thing, I'd be just thinking of my own research studies that I'd be involved in. And it's not uncommon, not necessarily from my research, just my studies, but other ones to collaborate on, that could be multiple research instruments being used in the study. Like, we'll just do a very easy one. We'll say that I'm going to do an anonymous survey, and then I'm going to be doing focus groups. So when it comes to this kind of data format, you're actually answering it per research instrument, really. You know, your survey could be collected, your data, if it's an anonymous survey, well, it's going to be collected anonymously, and then it's going to be stored anonymously. But then if I'm carrying out focus groups or interviews, well, it's going to be collected as identifiable, but then it's going to be stored however I decide to do it, more likely pseudo-anonymized. So often what I find when I'm completing this section here for the data format, I'd have to, in the please provide details about the data format, that information I provide would be subsections based on the research instrument I'm using. And that could be quite long or could be quite short, depending on how many research instruments are actually going to be used in the study as well. So that was just my own reflection on that when you asked us to go off and think there, Therese.
Perfect. Thanks, Seán. Yeah, and I suppose, yeah, and information that I'm hearing myself is that yeah, that this is kind of forcing people to think about the research design that they mightn't have thought about before. So yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks, Seán. Yeah, so that's a nice point, that the, you know, the formatting of the form can be changed to match what your answer needs to be. So yeah, here, like in this case, you know, broken up into you know, research tool, really. So thanks for that. Now, so having thought about protecting our subjects' data and all of the requirements around anonymizing it, and the legislation required, that I suppose ultimately and absolutely requires protection of personal privacy and data in the first instance. I'd like you to take a look at this dilemma. Now this comes from an app called the Dilemma Game, and it is, I suppose it's an EU-funded project that relates to research integrity, and it poses research dilemmas, and lets us think about how we would react and how we would act in certain situations that might not be favorable. Again, for a lot of these, and in this specific case, there is no right answer. There is no wrong answer, as how it's touted. There just might be kind of more, so I suppose the ways of dealing with it might be more correct than others. So I'll just let you have a read of this there. So my data is archived in a database stored in the central data archives of the university. As part of a routine integrity check by the university, I am requested to provide information on my respondents to ensure that these are actual existing people and to prove that there is no fabricated data. How do I respond to the request? So there straight away, you know, it's following research integrity practices to make sure, you know, that there's no fabrication happening, which is of course research misconduct, and that everything is above board. So the options for answering this question are as follows. And are we okay to look for replies in the chat, Seán, or?
Actually, there, Therese, I was able to just put this up on Menti there, and the link is in the chat, so I can share my screen, so we can let people, if participants there click on the link, they'll be able to kind of select their answer anonymously, and then when we give it a couple of minutes, we can then share maybe the screen to see, look, what the results are, if that's of help to you.
Ideal.
So if colleagues there look at clicking the link, you should be able to kind of submit an answer of A, B, C, or D. Now, what I often find with something like this, the dilemma myself anyway, is that it nearly takes me a read or two of it. So I'm just wondering, I mean, I wouldn't mind, could we go back to the previous slide just to take a quick read, because I'd be kind of just for my own answer as well. Thanks very much. Okay, I think you can go to the next one then and go, if you want to just put up the ABC. Super, thanks, Therese. So we're getting a couple of answers in there, which is great. We've 8 so far. And often what I find, because I've used this dilemma game often, or you know, the app often, and Therese is touching it, like sometimes when you're looking at this A, B, C, D, you'd be thinking, look, maybe there should be an E or there should be an F or something like that, or maybe my answer is a combination of A and B, and that's natural. Often, I know for my own self, this kind of dilemma is to be a catalyst for a conversation as well, you know, but maybe just for the purposes of this, if we could pick A, B, C, or D, it would be very helpful. The responses are still coming in there, Therese, so we can give it another couple of seconds in it.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay, we seem to have settled there on 24 responses. Now I could share my screen, but I think nearly for efficiency, it's just as easy if I call out the numbers that we have. Actually, we have another response just in there, so we're at 25. And so what we found here, so it's a 9-10-6-0 split here. So 9 participants said A, 10 participants said B, 6 participants said C, and then nobody said D. Okay, so that's where I'll just put it into the chat there so everyone can nearly see those numbers as well.
What are those percentages like, Sean? Off the top of your head. So it, all right, okay. So a out of 25, is it?
Yeah, so two-fifths, jeepers, you're putting me on the spot now. My maths in a recording. That's cruel. So two-fifths anyway is saying B to us. So that's 40%. So just shy then of 40% is saying A.
Right, okay.
And then around you're just
No,
saying just put above it, just above 20% then are saying C.
Yeah, so
that fair enough?
interesting. So again, I know this can be literally a frustrating game. It's called the dilemma game. It can be frustrating in that you know, the responses are limited.
And just to come in on that, because just one comment in the chat, that the answer depends on what is meant by information on respondents, and that's
it does,
well.
and the answer depends on on a few other things as well. I would say too. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's definitely limitations to this, but I think that's the aim of it. It's meant to kind of almost frustrate us into a conversation. Yeah, so interesting. So again, I think we're split really. I think it's almost fair to say that we're split. I know we have a very small sample number now in terms of research integrity to come to that conclusion, but you know, we're split on the answer. Within the so when this was, you know, distributed internationally, these were the response types. So again, very low response for D. So data collection integrity, superseding respondents' confidentiality looks to be widely recognized as not being the case. I answered A myself, that confidentiality of respondents is paramount. I don't comply and explain this in my response to the request. And I suppose I would just add to that there that, you know, having a management plan of your research data in relation to your research ethics requirements and you know what you feel you need to do to comply with those, having that pre-planned and recorded can again give you a document or a statement that you could easily put your hand on to reply to a request such as this. You know, in that no, I won't be passing on any or all of the information requested on my respondents as I completed a research ethics application prior to this study. And within that, the respondents were of the understanding, you know, written down that their information wouldn't be shared outside the stated areas and for the stated purpose, which again ties into the legislation and of course recognised research ethics best practice. Yeah, the majority of people again internationally here answered B, in that they would provide some access to the identity of the respondents. And again, possibly they mean there that they would I suppose you know, maybe in terms of again a research data management plan where you can state that, you know, the format of your subject's data is going to be anonymized or whatever, that you again, if it's pre-agreed or you know, pre-planned, that you would possibly be able to share, say, de-identified or anonymized information in such a way that the protection of your data as previously agreed and documented is maintained. So yeah, thanks for engaging in that there. I hope it's given you something to think about. just in terms of, again, confidentiality and the requirements.
Can I jump in there, Therese? Because that's
Yeah.
actually, because you've got me thinking now, since if you go back to the, like, I suppose it's important for everyone then to know that if we're going to be sharing the data, and like in the previous example there, like it nearly seemed to be a bit of an audit that we're sharing the data, like there needs to be consent from the participants to do that. So the participant would need to have given consent, and Therese has said this as well, you know, I'm just nearly reiterating it. So if we felt, just say I'm the lead in a research study, and I know maybe my funding, as part of my funding, the funders may want to audit my data. Well, okay, that's fair enough. If I know that in advance, then I'll ensure that my participants know that in advance, and I'll make sure I'll get consent on that. So we can share the data, but only if participants are consenting to it, you know. So it's very important that when a participant is involved in a research study, they know what's happening in their data at the start, during, and at the end of the study as well. So just reiterating that to Therese's point out. It was a very good dilemma. Thanks, Therese.
Yeah, exactly. And likewise, say where that hasn't been pre-arranged or pre-agreed, that all of MTU's policies, certainly, and obviously, you know, international and you know, the legal requirements here, they would all state that they would trump, I suppose, local you know, requirements like this, or local audits like this. So there is legislation, there is documentation there, say in an MTU case, certainly that would allow you to answer any requests like this that would fall outside of what's required. You know, there's everything has been carefully considered. Really, there are caveats that would allow you to legally show your, I suppose, your management or whoever that you absolutely cannot comply with these you know, requests outside of what has been agreed. So moving on then again to question 16, we are talking about protecting confidentiality here. Again, going back to the form, describe in detail the measures that will be taken to protect confidentiality of the data which will be collected. This looks like, you know, it's going into storage really, and who will have control of that. What we are looking at here is, I suppose a research repository, really, a data repository where the data will be stored and archived, and so on. We have guides for choosing a data repository. There are resources available that allow us to adhere to, you know, best practice, both internationally and locally. And what we would be looking for here, this is where I suppose research data management really intersects with the forum requirements. You know, again, there's resources here that you can put your hand on to answer this question. And I suppose, in short, you're looking at a research data repository that gives your submitted data set persistent identifiers, that it provides a landing page for each data set so that all of the information is collated with metadata that helps either you, the researcher, to find it if it needs to be controlled and securitized and kept out of public view, that it can be tracked, you know, that we are keeping control of it, and that it's a trusted data repository, and that clear terms and conditions that meet legal requirements are offered, for example, for data protection and so on. And this is from the DCC. We have links to those. This information is also available on the library website, which has been collated for you there. We can, you know, again, if this is a pinch point, we can go into further detail on that later on. But I suppose the short answer to parts of this question 16, are that we would be looking to easily answer this question by utilizing a recognized and reputable data repository. And that again, just beyond that, that the responsibility for the data, as in who, who will have control of the data generated by the research for this study, that, you know, that would be pre-arranged. And if we go to our research data management policy, our MTU research data management policy, it states that, you know, clearly for us, that the principal investigator has overall control, essentially for research data generated within MTU, and has overall responsibility for any, you know, data management plans that could you know, alleviate any concerns here, and that can answer this question in protecting confidentiality in terms of where it'll be stored and what format the data will be stored in. So that's question 16 there. I suppose, are there any pain points, as my colleague Sinead Hanrahan that gave me that term this morning, are there any pain points here that anybody would like to go through, or any issues with this question that perhaps we can help with and work through now? Put it into chat or shout.
Just one question in the chat there, Therese, is giving so on one of your slides there, I think you give examples of best practice for storing data, and there has just been mentioned, look, that would be useful to be linked on the application. Fully agree with that, but I suppose often when we go, there's a lot of links that would be useful to include in the application. So if we do that, then the application starts getting very long and it can be quite overwhelming for people to complete. So it's a very valid point. So where those links will go will be up onto the repository that up in the Canvas module of research ethics at MTU, the application process, and the links to that were up further there in the chat as well. Okay, so the links to the best practice for storing data that Therese is kind of alluding to there would be, we'll put it up onto the data repository, sorry, not the data repository, but the repository of resources that we have up in Canvas as well. Perfect.
Thanks a million, Seán.
And I suppose I have a question then, Therese, if you don't mind, if you go down to the next slide there. And again, generally just think, I suppose, just, no, it wasn't that one. Where is it? This one, yeah, this
16,
one. Yeah. Who will have control? So you touched on that there, I think. Did you? You said that.
I did, yeah, the data management policy. I thought I had an image.
Yeah.
In a slide there related to the to who would have control. It might be in the next one, actually. Yeah. Possibly data management. Yeah,
there it is there.
Yeah.
So we can see there in our research data management policy, it says there that the principal, the PI, and this would fall into the supervisor / PI that leads the project, would be responsible for the research data storage, security, and retention. I think that's useful because when you look at the box there, it's only natural, especially when we do research in MTU, that we're collaborating with a lot of people, even within MTU, not to mention external MTU. And all that research team, they can't all have control of the data. That doesn't make sense because things will go wrong. So often, from my experience, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Therese, but when it comes to that question that we were just looking at previous, it's to call out one person, maybe two at most, to who would actually have control of the data. Would you be thinking the same there, Therese, on that?
Yeah. I think, as you say, one or two, possibly as just a small number as possible, having overall responsibility. It just clarifies the role, and it clarifies a path then should any concerns arise. Now, I mean, looking at Horizon Europe's guide to to looking after data management and data protection, they would state that it's the responsibility of all researchers, which is of course understood. This is really who has overall, where does the buck stop? You know, who has overall, who is the contact point should any issues arise, and you know, who is really leading as to how this is done. And you know, if one voice is overall dictating that, it just leads to more clarity.
Perfect. Thanks, Therese. Now, I know now you jumped through your slides there now, so we were back in the previous one, I think it was.
Yeah, so again, if just moving through the form onto data collection responsibility. So who will be responsible for the secure storage, archiving of, and so on. So I suppose what we're talking about here is so section 16 or question 16, we're talking about the data at the point of collection, or slightly after it. And then here we're talking about I suppose the point after the data has been collected, and we're talking about the storage and the archiving of that, which of course again is referenced and is understood to be a huge part of research data ethics, the responsibility related to there, and you know, data management, responsible data management can help us to comply with you know, again, international best standards, and of course legislation relating to this. Again, so who will be responsible for the secure storage? Who will be responsible for archiving or destroying the data at the end of the study, at the end of its life? So we had a preview there that our own data management policy states that the PI is where the buck stops. And just down here, then please confirm what will happen to the data collected at the end of the study. And we have sections to go to then, if it's going to be archived, if it's going to be destroyed, or other. And by archived, I believe, Seán, we're talking about storage really here. We're talking about storage in recommended in a data repository.
Yes.
For that, and again, so upon archiving or storage, we're being asked in question 18 to indicate what will happen to the data, and so on. So who in MTU will be responsible for it, whether the data will be intended for personal use only, will the archived data be made available to other researchers, and provide details about how and where the data is to be archived. So yeah, so again, look, we're talking about research data storage here. We're talking about documenting this in a data management plan for research integrity, which also fulfills the requirement here. You know, as you're recording it here, you might as well stick it into a data management plan as well, so you're covered throughout the life cycle of your research. And again, you know, we have resources available to, you know, I suppose advising on best practice for data management storage. And just, we got a question there about whether a link should be on the form, and you did deal with that, Seán. Just even going through I suppose authoritative sources of this information, such as the Embassy of Good Science, there are dead links on their websites currently now, even as of today. So I suppose in order to prevent that happening, that you know, we run workshops like this, and the information is always changing, and the resources can be updated in places like the Canvas Canvas resource, the library website, or you know, I suppose recognized areas where this information should be available and updated.
Perfect. So we've one hand and one question. So hand up would be from Sinead there, if Sinead wants to jump in.
Hi, lads.
Hi, Sinead.
Hello, you're doing very well. I just want to ask, I suppose, make a comment and ask a question. So when you're talking about who has responsibility for the data management, I'd just like to flag with the students from our own research integrity module and any other PhD students that be mindful of, first of all, the duration that you're keeping your data for, and then making a claim that you'll be the person to either destroy it or archive or whatever. If that date is beyond your connection with the institution, then obviously you can't make that claim. So be thinking practically as well of how things can turn out. And the question I wanted to ask yourself, Therese and Seán, is do you have any advice in terms of where things are stored? So whether it's in a cloud-based storage, should it be on a OneDrive with MTU? Can somebody use a separate cloud service for that? If it's on like one laptop or something like that, what are the kind of protocols that you should be adhering to ensure the safety of the data?
So I think you have some practical experience of this, Seán. So, you know, I suppose you've been asked questions like that before. You've seen where solutions like Sinead is talking about there have been given as answers to this question on the form. So will you take that there just
Yeah.
for now, and I can come in?
No problem whatsoever. And just before I answer, do you mind going back up to your slides there to where kind of it feeds into this one here? I think it is. Is this? Yeah. Who will be responsible? Go back one more, maybe. Is it 16 even? Yeah, I suppose it's all linked to a certain extent. So I suppose, where will the data be stored or archived? That's it there. It's the second one there in the box. And I suppose essentially it should be MTU related. Okay, it should be some device recognized by MTU. So, and it's a case of, it's only natural that you're going to have it on your computer. I would imagine most people will have it on their computer, their laptop, but that should be a password protected laptop. That's the first thing. Okay, so that should be a password protected laptop is what you have it on. Then the next thing then is, well, what happens if the laptop gets lost or stolen? Okay, so do you actually have a backup of the raw data? Okay, because what you've done is, or what we have done is, we've gathered data from participants. So now it's our responsibility to make sure that we're storing that data correctly. Now, if we're storing it on a laptop and then we end up losing the laptop, well, then we're kind of negligent towards, or we're undermining our responsibility to the participants. So we should always have it backed up somewhere. Okay, so you could say, and it's not, and there's a few ways to do this. You could say you'll have it backed up on an external hard drive. Now that doesn't overly get mentioned a lot, but that is something to be said. But then equally, then you could say, well, what happens if the external hard drive gets lost? I mean, they're not massive; they can get lost as well. So often, what we'd like to see at the very least at the moment is that you're storing it on a password protected laptop and then backed up on MTU OneDrive. And it would be important to say it's MTU OneDrive. And now, obviously, I know for some students we're not on the MTU OneDrive, but there is an equivalent then with a Google Drive that is linked in with MTU as well. Okay. Would that be okay first, Sinead and Therese there? Are you okay with that one? Because I know now there's another hand up as well, and there's another comment in the chat.
Yeah, that's great, Seán. Thanks a million.
And then just the other point then Sinead mentioned there, and it's so important. It's just like for the students, we'll say, I mean, if you're kind of saying that you're going to be the one destroying the data, and maybe you're thinking that you might do that in 5 years' time, but you may not be a student within MTU in 5 years' time. Okay, maybe your research journey within MTU has finished at that point. So that's why in our research data management policy, it is called out more so that it's the PI's responsibility in that case. Okay, to be named there. Now, maybe you might say the student up to a certain point, and then the PI will take over. That's fair enough. To me, that's two names being called out. We don't necessarily want to see a flood of names there. Then there's also just a comment, and it feeds into what I'm just saying there, is around, and Therese, you can come in and answer this one maybe, is just around the duration for storing or archiving data. Are there any guidelines that to check on this? And I'm just reading it in case I just read this out word for word. So in case I would need to grant access to some data for proving that my data is not made up falsely. Okay, so there's kind of two things there, maybe duration storing, the duration for storing and archiving the data. I suppose that kind of feeds into the second question actually. And then I see that there's a hand up, and we'll come to that then afterwards.
Yeah, perfect. Sorry. Sorry, I was just looking at other stuff there. So yeah, is that answered, Sinead? I mean, again, what Seán said is correct, and there are, you know, there are understood, there are standards recognized, I suppose, checklists for storing this as well, you know, that you would have again, you know, that you would have, I suppose, a backup that you know, your password protected and so on, that you would have a combination of security measures for the data that you're dealing with live, really. You know, we can't expect you to be working off databases you know, when you're actually day to day going through the data. So yeah, there are recognized, and there are resources available to let you know easily whether you're good for that.
Okay, and just, I suppose the question there just at the was just around the duration for storing or archiving.
And we actually we come to that in a couple of slides, I think.
Perfect.
It's dealt with on the forum as well. Oh yeah, it's here in section 16. How long will the data be stored or archived? So in our own code of good conduct for research, we state, I suppose, particularly vaguely, that I'm just going to move through here because I have it. I did anyway.
There you are.
I have it
there.
Yeah. So for our own data storage and retention recommendations, in agreement again with the European Code of Conduct, we ask for data to be stored with secure preservation for a reasonable period. If you look at similar policies for other institutions and organizations, they would be looking at a 10-year max, with I suppose allowances for, say, undergraduate or other types of data or research data that could be less. But the general, just from my own reading around of it, from, you know, different organizations and institutions, is that 5 years seems to be a number that's generally accepted. So a reasonable period here seems to relate to allowing a reasonable amount of time for the data to be, I suppose, analysed, for it to be looked at in terms of value add for other research, so I suppose literally to get a bit of good out of the research, it needs to be up for a reasonable period of time to allow that. And it's generally accepted that 5 years would be for that, and then probably up to a max of 10 years, depending on the type of research. If that's a fair enough answer.
Okay, so I just see, is the hand, yeah, we've two hands up there, but I'm just thinking there, just looking at the time, Therese, do you want to finish off the few bits that you want to cover, and then we can look at the hands, and there's a couple of more questions coming in the chat as well. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect.
Yeah, so we'll come to the hands up, and we'll come to the questions in the chat there, maybe in a couple of minutes. Thanks.
Yeah, if you want to keep the hands up, thanks. So question 17 there, again, look, data management responsibility, and in relation to data storage, and then I suppose post storage of the data. And again, your PI is the who in to answer that question at the end of the day, but you know, with a nod to other funding agencies and leaders in this area, that they would request that all researchers take responsibility for this research data management, and specifically, of course, the data protection of respondents' information and data. And then in terms of data destruction and deletion, which again, it all forms part of your data management and your database management. We are looking at you know, following our own code of good conduct, which follows on from the European Code of Conduct, which is kind of our internationally recognized standard that we're all following off, really. And they state that, look, they leave it open enough in terms of a reasonable period, sorry now, and in terms of generally we're looking at 5 years, but when we are looking at these areas, we need to take into account, I suppose, on a hierarchical basis, what does our I'm just going to go back to the website page there. What does your funder require? So just from the library webpage itself, just in terms of data storage, what does your funder require? First off, and then what if you're going to use an external data archive, say that's recommended by your the domain that you're researching, that's recommended in your subject area. What do they say in terms of what are their what is the license agreement that you're going to have with them? What does their website, essentially, what does their database allow for? Does it require all data to be deleted after 5 years? Does it do it itself? Does it allow you to store your data on there indefinitely? You know, that would also follow for say you're on your open general data repositories such as Zenodo or Figshare. What do they say? You know, those terms and conditions could change. I know that in reality they all allow for you know, minimum storage of 10 years in you know, cost-free, essentially. They're all openly available authoritative data repositories. But you know, looking at the EU and EU funded research, there's you know, possible data requirements, data storage requirements coming down the line there as well, in terms of you know, I suppose branch off organizations such as EOSC and so on. So depending on who your funder is, what those requirements will be there. So a lot of the time it can be dictated for you, and other times then, you know, it's fairly open in terms of what you want to do, or what you think is appropriate in relation to the study that you're carrying out, in the subject area that you're carrying out. So yeah, that's question 18. And then similarly for this, you know, will the archive data be made available to other researchers? For that, we can read the public as well. you know, that can be, you know, again, you can have autonomy over that in relation to where you store your data. So you can have an access point for the public, or for other researchers, or for only your own team, depending on you know, how much of your data you want to make available. You can close off parts of it. You can make you know, the anonymized sections of it available. All of this can be done quite easily if you use a recognized you know, data repository from an authoritative source again. Yeah, all of your storage, future use, deletion policies, and so on can all be looked after by, you know, essentially outside but linked organizations, including your funder or your data repository that you choose, again with resources available within MTU as to how to to manage and utilize those data destruction and deletion again. That again, dictated on a hierarchy by what's required by your funder, what's required by your organization, what do you think is appropriate yourself, and what your data repository actually does. Yeah, the final slide there just relates to data access and publication. So your again, a recognized data repository will allow for all of these items to take place. So it can allow for secure storage, it can allow for confidential storage, it can allow for part of it, then the bits that you want to be available, again, the bits that you can have open as necessary, as closed as possible. You can have full autonomy over all of those, and your recognized data repository will allow for that. And also, at the end of the day, which is why we're here, it'll allow you to comply with your requirements for data ethics that you have documented in your data ethics application form. Yeah, so we go to questions there.
That's excellent. Thanks very much, Therese. Yeah, so we 15 minutes now, which is great, just for a bit of a Q&A. So we'll do the hands first, and then I'm just looking at compiling the few comments there and questions into the chat as well. So if we go with the hands, let me see who has them. Niall was one, I think, wasn't it? Sorry, no.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So on the format of the stored data,
Yeah.
It's been mentioned there that if it's in MTU OneDrive and also at the same time in a password protected computer, that is generally sufficient. So I'm not hearing a requirement to, for example, encrypt the data. I'm not hearing a requirement to take those extra measures. And I guess that potentially links back to how sensitive the data is, because encrypting the data as you're collecting it can become quite impractical. So if you need to encrypt and re-encrypt after each session, that would be quite hard to, especially if you have an extended period of data collection. So if you could comment on that, I guess in my own case, I'm thinking that the data would be moderately sensitive, but would not be the most sensitive type of data. It would be more about business performance than anything personal per se. So any comment on that would be appreciated.
So yeah, Niall, in response to that, I suppose the main priority is to comply with legislation. So if the data can identify a participant, so if they can be identified by it, then you know that's a serious issue. So if the only way to not identify the participant is by encrypting it, then it would need to be encrypted. Such is my reading of the legislation. If we can apply techniques, you know, the anonymization techniques, or, you know, de-identification or so on, if we can apply either one or more techniques to de-identify that information, and essentially take it out from under the legislation, then you know, possibly, as you say, the need to encrypt it may not be required. If it's impractical, it doesn't matter really. Are we complying with the legislation to not identify our participants and not proliferate personal information? Is that, I suppose it just comes down to...
It's not particularly clear to me, because if the data is in a password protected computer and it is on M2 OneDrive, then it's not public data. The question is, does it, that extra step of encrypting that data even further than normal, is that in above and beyond what would normally happen with that data? Is that required? I guess was kind of what I was getting at. Because it wasn't mentioned, I'm assuming it is not, but you've given a kind of, what you've said there, that kind of contradicts that to some extent. So it's still not fully clear to me.
So I suppose if you can answer the question, is the data identifiable, then, you know, then it is required. If the data through your other methodologies is now no longer identifiable, publicly identifiable, or identifiable by you know, an intruder, as is the term in the legislation, then it's not required. So you know, if your key, if your raw data is, you know, if you are sure that it is secure, if you can stand over that, then you know, without encryption, then encryption isn't required. And it just all comes down to, is the data identifiable? Are the subjects identifiable from the data?
Okay, thank you for that. So just, I think in my own case, we would then need to encrypt it because it's identifiable data for the jury, and we'll have to deal with the practical issues that brings with the data throughout that phase. Okay, thank you.
I would say, yeah, if you know, if you want to be sure, then yeah, probably, unfortunately. There, do you have any thoughts on that, Seán?
No, but I just think, look, it's obviously kind of a very particular type case, so maybe that's just something we could talk about after this seminar as well, Niall, if that would be a help. And I suppose, I know I'm the one who mentioned the password protected laptop, but I would feel that if I have data on my laptop that is password protected, I would have that protected as well. I mean, I would see that as, especially if it's my raw data. You know, if I was storing my raw data in an Excel file, I'd expect when I open up that raw data that I have to put in a code to actually get access to it. You know, so I would have that layer as well. Now that doesn't fully address Niall's one there, but I think maybe we can tease that out maybe separate, because it's quite a unique case as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect, no problem. So happy to, if you want to follow up on that, and then Violetta, and then we'll move into the comments in the chat. So thanks.
Thanks. Sorry, now I may be asking questions that maybe were answered already because I had another meeting to overrun. Now, there were some things in the slides that, will the slides be available first of all?
Yeah, so I might as well, so slides and recording will be available afterwards. Okay, because I know there was another question on that, so that both will be available afterwards.
It's just some of it, you know, some of it through, you know, it's a little bit vague, as in open to interpretation. And I know that you've answered some of it since I logged in anyway, but they're not there in the slide. So, for example, if there is a comment there or a thing, it's, you know, they should be stored for a reasonable time. You know, it might not be any harm to put it in there? What's reasonable times at 5 years, at 10 years, at 15 years, or in what circumstances? And then, like things like that, like for example, we should specify the type of data. Well, what types of data are there? Like, it's, as I said, I don't think that maybe necessarily we need to, I think it's important that there's so much in it that you kind of feel like almost giving up before you start. I think a bit of help in what should go in, what is even available in terms of what are the options for staff would be helpful, so that that you can store it for the period. Good practice would be whatever, up to 10 years or whatever, or the type of data or this, or the storage capabilities would be such as OneDrive and whatever, and that would be okay, because you don't want to be sending in applications and for that to come back and saying, oh, OneDrive actually isn't good enough, or it needs to be password protected. And as for data encryption, I don't even want to go there, because then there surely should be some workshops to actually advise how to encrypt and decrypt data, because people, might know how to do that. And certainly I've, I was under the impression that if you have good, password protected things, then it does not need to be encrypted, which now seems to be contradicted. So that kind of worried me a little bit, because if we need to encrypt every single bit of data, then we'll be, that'll make our job conducting any research, that much more difficult. But then we also have to be compliant, as you say, with the legislation. So, but I'm not sure what the encrypting is necessarily equals compliance. So I'm a little bit, well, that's all. Like, you don't have that slide, Therese, because it took them away. So, but it was like before point 4. There's just if you can share them again, just so that maybe I apologize if they were raised before.
Yeah.
That's
So
okay.
just come in there. No, go on, Therese, you go first.
Just on that point there about that we have to that there's an issue there with the encryption. My apologies if that's not clear. So there you don't have to encrypt everything. It's do you have identifiable data? Can a person be identified from the data that you have available? That is the question. That is the first principle. That needs to not be the case. So encryption is only required in the case where, for example, you have a collection of raw data where personal information is there, such as names, email addresses, locations, health information, etc., either direct or indirect personal information. And then you may have coded information with a key to that. That's a level of encryption that you're applying. But it is only identifiable information, personal information, that needs to be encrypted. Just to clear that.
No, it's just like, if you could just go back a little bit on those slides, just a bit towards point 4.
Sorry.
Yeah, like even in this one, when you say justify why the data will be destroyed, or confirm who will be responsible for destruction of the data, or when will data be destroyed. And if you go back again, no, I just think on the right, if some possible options would be listed as to who are possible people that are responsible. Now, I know you have it here as a PI, but could the other people also be responsible for destruction of the data, or should they be? Or even here, if
you mean so this slide here, this isn't the form. Do you mean on the form?
If you just leave that here, like will the archive data be made available to other researchers? Is it bad or good? Should it be? Is it allowed? Will the application be refused if it is? And then when you say how, I mean, what kind of how is there? Is there,
Okay, can I come in there, just conscious of time there, Violetta, as well? Okay, so I suppose I mean, technically all these things could be further explained, additional text put in, but then ultimately, if that's done, you're going to end up with an application form that will be 30 or 40 pages long. So that's just not practical. And I don't think any researcher would welcome opening up an application that would have so much as in combination of text that needs to be completed and then all this explanation. So what we've done is those explanations are up on the Canvas module. So there's a Canvas module created, MTU, research ethics at MTU, the application process. If there's questions around, we'll just say, who should we put in that would be responsible for archiving the data? If a researcher has a question on that, there's a Q&A, there's a discussion forum up in this Canvas module that allows that question to be asked and a response will be given. There are resources up in that module also that will do that. And I say it is a module because obviously when we do something up in Canvas, it is a module, but I also said earlier it's a repository because it's essentially a place where there are these resources available and there's these mechanisms to ask these questions as well. It's not possible. I mean, it is technically possible to put them into the application, but if we put it into the application, we're going to end up with a very long application and that won't be welcomed by anybody either. Okay, so the balance there is if we want further information, register for the Canvas module, the links were put into the chat, and then that additional information would be there. Like there's information in the discussion forum there on the Canvas module, there's information about how to pseudonymize data. There's information about how get informed consent when it comes to qualitative research and trying to look and sharing transcripts openly. There's information on those things. So I would encourage you maybe just to check out that module. I see that also that I would fall, you mentioned about the types of data as well there, Violetta. I would think, again, that's a question to be putting into the Canvas module and those will be asked, answered. Okay, that would be, I suppose, it's not possible to answer all those questions in the actual application form. And this will be consistent with other application forms that you see in other HEIs as well, as in they don't put in all that explanation. That will be in a separate platform, and our platform is the Canvas module. Very conscious of time here, so I do want to address the questions that were put into the chat as well. So there was just one, and I'm going to summarize this. Earlier on, there was a question around definitions for the types of data, not the types of data, but yeah, I suppose when you collect the data, is it anonymous? Is it potentially identifiable, pseudonymized? Looking for definitions of that. Again, there's resources up in the Canvas module to help with all that. If we put in links into the application form, it just starts making it more complicated than it needs to be. And I know that the application form can be overwhelming even as it is at the moment. So we're trying to kind of get that balance. Is it possible to have examples of answers? Again, I would feel the concern there would be if we give template answers, and then what happens if we're reviewing an application, say the HREX, so the Human Research Ethics Committee, are we going to be reviewing an application in a couple of months' time, and they start reviewing the application and it's the template answer that is they're reviewing. Then you're really questioning, does the researcher actually know what they're actually saying in the actual application? So we're always very cautious in giving examples, thorough examples of a full ethics application form, because you don't want that thrown back at you. Not necessarily, I don't mean thrown back in a bad way or anything like that, but you don't want that just kind of being submitted back and you're reviewing that in the HREC. Again, when it comes to maybe template wording, that's where the discussion forum up in the Canvas module can be used there. A question could be asked, look, what is the sample wording that we could use for a particular box in the application form? And somebody will surely respond to that. I will be at the very least. There was another question about data management plans. Is there templates? The library have a web page. We put that into the chat. Therese touched on it already as well, of DMP Online. That's a subscription that we have. If you register for that, you'll see that there's templates for all these data management plans. There's numerous data management plans that you could just adopt and you can use that going forward. I'm summarizing that, but there is more information as well. And you're happy enough to, if you want to reach out to Therese and myself, we can follow up on that as well. Another one was about the future use of the data and should participants be known? So the question was, if you're unsure whether you want to use the data in the future, should you still look to get ethical approval for that? The answer is yes, you would. I mean, it's better to be looking for it than looking at it than looking for it. But it's also very, very important that whatever your intention is with the data, it's not that it just goes into the application form, but it's also that the participant knows that, okay? And that was something that was alluded to in the comment as well above, which is in the information leaflet that you might be giving to a participant, you need to tell the participant, look, what your intention with the data is, how you're going to store it, for how long, what's going to happen after that time point. Are you going to be looking to disseminate the data? Are you going to be looking at disseminating the findings from the research study? All that information needs to go into the information leaflet as well, and a participant needs to consent to that. If it's an anonymous survey, you're still looking at calling those bits out, but in a shorter aspect. So when we're looking at completing the application form, there's the application form as Therese is working through here really well for us today, but then there's also what does the participant see? Because the participant never sees the application form. The HREC see the application form and reviewing it, but the HREC also need to know, well, what do you plan on telling the participant? So we need to see sample information leaflets and sample consent forms as well. And that can often be the case as a researcher, you're saying, look, I'm duplicating my work here. I've mentioned it in the application and I'm mentioning it in the information leaflet. And yes, that is the case. You are duplicating it because the application is seen by the HREC, the leaflet is seen by the participant. I know now I said I was going through that quite a lot there. That's actually the main ones that I come up with. And I just see one there about the hyperlinking. Yes, I take that point, but I suppose it's the mechanics of this. So there's just a question there. How would you be making the form long if you're hyperlinking? And I get that, but then sometimes hyperlinks change. Okay, and it can be very, very frustrating if you're working through an application, you click on a link and you get nowhere. So we're actually guided by the university that when we create application forms, when we're creating policies and procedures, we try not to have too much hyperlinks in it because of that whole sustainability of it. Okay, so what we have is there's actually a new version of the ethics application form being drafted at the moment. And what we'll do is at the very start, we'll hyperlink to the resources that are up on the Canvas module. And that will be the main hyperlink really, because doing it throughout the application form can be just frustrating for everybody if the web page ends up changing as well. Okay. Now I know I covered a lot there. Just conscious of time now. I'm not running out the door. I don't think Therese is running out the door. So we can hang on for a couple of more questions here, but I just conscious that we advertised this as 11 to 1:15. So I wanted to ensure we got that done. So sorry note for that. So Therese, I don't know if you wanted to come in on anything that was said there as well.
No, yeah, no, I think you've covered it all. I suppose just to put an overarching thought on that, it would be great to have, templates or recommendations or more concrete information in the form, but all of this is dependent on too many variables really to do that. That's the reason for an awful lot of why the policies look the way they do, why these application forms look the way they do. It depends on the study, it depends on the subject, it depends on the type of data, how long it's going on for, whether there's collaboration, etc., etc. It's difficult to have a general form, but these are the best that we can do really. Violetta, did you have another question there?
Yeah, no, I meant more, questions that are generic. So from what Seán is saying, I'm understanding that's probably in the repository. So a question like, who in MTU will be responsible for the archive and future use of the data? So that would just mean the people dealing with it, not like IT department or whatever. So it's just like sometimes you're not quite sure. Do I mean to put in IT department or OneDrive people or so is that all in the repository, Seán? Is that what you're saying, that that kind of information we can find out?
Yes, that information is there. I mean, it's not exhaustive. So I mean, like that particular question, that's very specific. And I suppose if the question isn't already asked in the discussions, then that's for you just to put up that as a question. Like, to me, that's a very reasonable question to put up. And I think everyone would actually appreciate that, to be honest, Violetta. So, I mean, ultimately, it's not the IT department. It is yourself as the researcher or whoever the lead researcher is. That would be the answer to it. But I think if that's not clear from the resources that are there, it's to ask that question, and then somebody in the team that's overseeing that module will give a response. Okay.
Thanks. Thank you.
No problem, Violetta.
Yeah, and just thanks for those types of questions as well, Violetta, because this isn't the only workshop that we can do, and it can be repeated, and this is an organic process really.
Yeah, I know, and thank you very much. And as I said, I will watch the video because I missed a good bit of it, and I very much fear that one of you will be hearing from me.
That's fine. No, because it allows us to build, I suppose, a framework really based on these questions, because that's what people want. So thank you for them.
Thanks, guys.
So I think we leave it there. I suppose thank Therese for the time now for this. often it's only natural when you're in these. I know for myself, when I'm in these kind of seminars, I'm nearly just thinking about my own research and kind of saying that it kind of gets me in this kind of reflective mode. So I'd say I'll be back in touch with Therese with more questions for myself as well. But look, thanks very much, Therese, for the time. Thanks everyone for here. That I know some people have to jump off there as well, which is completely understandable. Thanks very much for the engagement, and I think that there's plans for more seminars like this as well over the coming months. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks everyone.
Thanks very much, everyone.